everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrea Thaxton Arbogast, and I'm a member of the YWCA World Service Council. Today, we are celebrating our 101st annual meeting. This time a year ago, we were celebrating a century of service. And so we looked back over the work that we had done for the last 100 years and really just honored that. Today, we are looking to the future, to our next century of service. And boy, do we have an agenda packed for you today. Our first speaker that's going to get us kicked off is Elaine Carlson. Now, Elaine is the co-chair of the World Service Council, and she has such an illustrious history with the YWCA. She started with the YWCA back as a Y teen. Since then, she was able to attend college on a YWCA scholarship and really ignited her passion for the world work with her first local YWCA, the St. Paul YWCA. Since then, she served as a delegate with the World Council in 1970, and she says she was privileged to vote on the one imperative to eliminate racism wherever it exists and by any means necessary. Since Elaine's humble beginnings as a Y teen, she has worked at local, national, and world levels. We are so thankful for Elaine and the wealth of knowledge and information that she has provided to us over the years. Elaine, we are so thankful you're here, and I pass the torch to you to really dive us into this fresh agenda today.
Welcome to this 101st annual meeting of the YWCA World Service Council. As you may know, the World Service Council grew out of the war work in 1917 by Mrs. John D. Rockefeller and Mrs. Stuart Cushman, resulting in the establishment of YWCAs in 17 countries. Now, 101 years after its creation, the World Service Council continues to support the work of the World YWCA. And we are thrilled that our members have not wavered during this current pandemic. From the perspective of one who has worked at YWCAs in the USA and at the World YWCA, it is a joy for me to be in the company of visionary women who act on their desire to be global citizens. Last year, your giving enabled us to fulfill the world's request for $100,000 to foster the development of young women leaders and to provide a $10,000 discretionary fund to address emergencies. In order to continue the tradition of rising to the challenge, we need each of you to help during the last week of October to fill the $20,000 gap between what we have raised so far and our combined goal of $110,000 for the World YWCA in the year 2022. Please join us with a gift today using the links in the chat box or on the World Service Council website, where you can learn more, as well as watch last year's virtual celebration. You can make the difference. Help us reach this goal again this year. Thank you. We are looking forward to an informative and engaging 2 hours. We will have the opportunity to learn of the status of women across the globe and to be updated on the work of the YWCA USA and the World YWCA. We will especially benefit from the views of young women responding to our theme for the day, which is calling on generations of visionaries. As we anticipate this to be a memorable gathering, a recording of the event will be available for viewing on the World Service Council website in the near future. Also, before year end, our supporters will receive the Centennial Commemorative Booklet. Mildred Morrison and I, as co-chairs this year, wish to express our deep appreciation to the Creative and Flexible Planning Committee and the YWCA national staff for organizing this virtual event. You will get to meet our incoming co-chair, Gloria Chun-Hu, who will close this event. Enjoy the program.
Our next speaker comes to us from the World YWCA. It is none other than Board President Mira Rizek. Mira is a recognized leader with over 30 years of solid local and international experience in the NGO sector and municipal development, especially in the areas of strategic planning, good governance, monitoring, and evaluations. She's an activist in the area of human rights and especially women's rights. Mira has been an active YWCA member since her childhood and served as the National General Secretary at the YWCA of Palestine from 2006 to 2020 until she was elected president at the 29th World Council meeting held in Johannesburg, South Africa in late 2019. As a board member of the World YWCA myself, it is my honor and my pleasure to serve under the leadership of Mira Rizek, especially during these difficult times of COVID. Thank you for joining us today, Mira.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this wonderful introduction. My dear sisters in the World Service Council, leaders and members of the YWCA of the USA and globally. What a pleasure it is for me to be with you today on your 101st anniversary, an event that ascertains your long legacy, long service, and commitment. It's very unfortunate that you could not convene this meeting physically. I was so much looking forward to being with you in New York. Yet, I do commend you for your courage to still convene and celebrate despite the continued COVID situation. The theme of your conference, calling on generations of visionary, affirms that the world we're living in today needs us even more as an intergenerational women's movement to live up to our vision for a world free of racial discrimination, inequalities, and all forms of violence. Through our work, and as we pursue this vision, we continue to assert our commitment to human rights-based, feminist, faith-based, and intersectional leadership that is grounded in local communities and is grassroots-driven. The work is led by women in response to the needs that they see in their own communities. As a World YWCA, we continue to be focused on building a strong network of intergenerational leaders. We continue to be called upon to build young women's leadership that can transform power structures so we can create a world where sustainable peace and justice, dignity for all, and equality prevails. This is our vision, and this is our collective commitment to meet our 2035 goal and agenda as a global YWCA. Additionally, and by continuing to provide support, especially to young women, to be agents of change who can influence and mobilize their peers, we hope they can influence governments and policymakers to produce more gender-sensitized policies. In doing so, we are actively working towards the UN 2030 agenda to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. After 100 years of work, you might think we are done, but I assure you, my friends, we're far from being done. We have much more to do to realize that vision. As a board, we are working hard to make our voices heard, to flag global issues of injustice, build a strong culture of transparency and accountability, and promote an open and robust communication with our member associations. So we continue to sustain our strong presence, conducive networks, and profound vision. The World YWCA, with the World Service Council and leaders of the YWCA of USA, for over a century, have been doing critical work together to ensure that rights of girls, young women, and women are protected in every region and corner of this world. As the world faces turmoil, wars, occupations, climate disasters, and pandemics, and as the space for civil society continues to shrink and gender gaps widen, your support for a global movement becomes more critical and is helping us to reach our goal and be more impactful. I invite us all today to look beyond our own boundaries. The YWCA has always been a global movement with visionary leaders, and we will always be called upon by our communities to be responsive, innovative, creative, and relevant. So together, let us do it. With your support, you have made it possibly and historically possible for our vision to come to life and to put words in action. I thank you for supporting us and hope that this partnership grows even further in the future so we can make the positive impact and the positive difference we aspire to make in women's lives. Thank you for offering me this opportunity to be with you today to celebrate this wonderful occasion. I wish you every success for all the future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira, for those very powerful remarks. You are absolutely right. We have come a long way in 100 years, but we still have more work to do. My next speaker is Casey Harden. She is the General Secretary of World YWCA and has held that position since 2019. Casey has been involved in the YWCA movement for 23 years through various executive and leadership positions. She's been involved at the local, regional, national, and now international level on issues such as health and wellness, sexual and gender-based violence, economic security, racism, social justice, strategy, governance, operations, and more. She's truly a woman of all trades. So please help me in welcoming Casey Harden.
Warm greetings from the World YWCA. We've passed a milestone of almost 2 years in the globe living with a new ever-present virus. Before the pandemic in 2019, the YWCA World Council approved a strategic framework. Some of you voted on it. It was a plan that embraced those things that YWCA has done well for decades, those things that work. It also embraced all the things we needed to do differently to be relevant, authentic, to be financially vital, and nimble enough for the 21st century. And to also hold ourselves accountable that we could draw a direct line from every effort we make that could thread directly to the lives and realities of girls, young women, and women in community. World YWCA committed to continue to be an incubator for women leaders and to be a place and a community for strong, powerful, and humble helpers, advocates, and fighters. Just a few months later, though, YWCA leaders were on the move in ways we weren't expecting, responding to the pandemic and secondary issues of food scarcity, domestic and family violence, disproportionate impact on girls and women across the board, increased child marriage, and more. YWCA has responded with relevant, needed, and creative solutions so quickly, and it was a testament to the value, the effectiveness, and the need for the YWCA. Today, for this centennial celebration, as a once young leader of the movement and now as a much older leader, I share my deep thank you to, and I acknowledge the remarkable role that the World Service Council has consistently played for the global YWCA movement. Such commitment only comes from a place of inspiration, from a place of conviction, and from a place of hope. So at this event, I want to help renew your inspired vision, conviction, and hope. Our goal that by 2035, 100 million young women across the world, 2% of the global female population, which is 1 in 50 women, who need a helping hand, a platform to lead, a partner to work with, or a guiding star will not be left without it. World YWCA is not static. We are moving and we're shaking and we're humming. World YWCA is successfully serving as an international convener of 100 YWCAs and tens of thousands of YWCA leaders around the world. We have new ways of communicating, new ways of sharing, new ways of partnering. We have and will continue to develop toolkits, frameworks, and models co-created with YWCA leaders to support on-the-ground work. We've worked hard and smart to make changes, so YWCA is a place for far more young leaders to find or keep their footing, to be heard, and to effect the change they know is needed. The support of the World Service Council helps young women leaders especially, and you will hear more about that later. You help resource the ambitious design of the YWCA. You help us show up strong as we work with partners like WHO, the United Nations Foundation, the Government of Australia and Netherlands, YWCA national and local member associations, and more. You allow us to immediately adapt a safe space leadership model to one that can be used online when a global pandemic strikes. You allow us to develop an innovative feminist, human rights-based consultation methodology for young leaders to use as they advocate. You allow us to support YWCA leaders in Myanmar, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, Denmark, Haiti, Argentina, Taiwan, and more. The value of your support of this international grassroots responsive and evolving YWCA global movement cannot be overstated. Before I say goodbye, I want to share quickly this National Geographic that I picked up at a flea market, I think, a long time ago. I think I was about 23 or 24. And it caught my eye because it said YWCA International Success Story. And I had been with the YWCA for a year or two. In it is Mary French Rockefeller, and she traveled 53,000 miles, and in those miles visited YWCAs around the globe. In her role as chairman, as it's stated here, chairman of the Young Women's Christian Association's World Service Council. So she writes this piece for National Geographic, and in it she says, "The women of the YWCA are lighting candles to bring beauty and hope into the lives of those around them. In youth centers and refugee camps, in nursery schools and universities all over the world, these women are working to help others. It never imposes programs, but instead seeks to help women and girls meet their own needs and in turn meet the special needs of their region." And then it goes on to showcase page after page what the YWCA does around the globe. With that, I want to say congratulations and cheers to the World Service Council and the World Service Council members. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Casey, for the powerful remarks about the World YWCA and for the acknowledgement of the World Service Council. As always, we appreciate all the work that you do and your team. Next, I would like to introduce the president of the YWCA USA, Tina Herrera, who will be providing us with the YWCA USA report. Tina is the newly elected president of the YWCA USA as of June 2021, and she has a long history with the YWCA, starting back at a local association in Berkeley, California. Thank you for joining us today, Tina. We are so blessed to have you.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate you having me here today to share a bit about the action and focus of YWCA USA this past year. As we know, women all over the world experience oppression, and this past year, living in a pandemic, the burdens have become even more stark and more devastating. Within the YWCA USA community, we see the severe impact the pandemic has had on women and communities of colors in the United States. Yet YWCA has remained steadfast in our commitment to do the hard work needed to achieve our mission. YWCAs across the country have stepped up to provide childcare to frontline workers. We have increased domestic violence services for women who are trapped in their home with their abusers. We provided meals and shelter to those who lost jobs and lost wages during the shutdown. We launched entrepreneurship activities and digital job training initiatives for teens, and so much more. Over this past year, and as we look ahead, YWCA USA has sharpened our focus. We continue to implement our strategic business plan, centering on building healthy associations, deepening our commitment to racial justice, and securing sustainable funding to invest in the YWCA and young women. Our interim CEO, Alicia Rhodes, has done an amazing job elevating the YWCA during this time. Besides tirelessly leading the implementation of our plan, she boldly launched our racial justice continuum strategy, cultivating network leaders and positioning the YWCA USA as a thought leader within racial justice. Boldness has been our calling this year. Along with the many legislative activities we've taken on, we recently took a bold stand for reproductive rights on behalf of young women. On September 20th, we filed an amicus brief with the United States Supreme Court supporting protection of Roe v. Wade for the good of future generations of young women. Although the current case pertains to a ruling in Mississippi, the case threatens the fundamental rights of all U.S. women. As an organization centered on young women's leadership, we spoke to the detrimental effects of this case on our constitutional rights, economic futures, and health of young women of color, young women from poor backgrounds, and other marginalized women. We did this despite a potential threat to funding. This generation would be the first US generation in 50 years to come of age in this country without authority over their own bodies. And as the largest women's organization in the United States, and for the sake of young women's futures, we cannot afford to sit this one out. And this week, as part of our global movement with the World YWCA to End Violence Against Women and Girls, YWCA USA held our 26th annual Week Without Violence campaign, raising awareness to end a broad spectrum of violence. We focused on providing information and resources to support healing and building a thriving future for survivors. And speaking of our global movement, it was a pleasure to learn that a young woman from the YWCA Walla Walla, Washington, is part of the World YWCA Leadership Cohort program this year. I personally believe there is great value in developing young women's leadership potential, especially through the World YWCA lens. My own worldview and leadership vision were dramatically changed many years ago as a 20-year-old college student. I traveled to the Philippines with a group of young women jointly sponsored by World YWCA and YWCA USA. Through this joint project, I experienced firsthand the life-changing power of connecting with young women around the globe. It altered the course of my life. There is so much that we as USA, World YWCA, and World Service Council can do together to develop our global network of young leaders. And as I welcome a new CEO very, very soon at YWCA USA, I look forward to charting a productive path for future generations of young women to grow their leadership potential and be able to lift the burdens this pandemic has illuminated. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you, Tina, for those inspiring words from YWCA USA. Our next speaker is no stranger to many of us. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed keynote speaker, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka is the former executive director of UN Women, and she has served in that position for 8 years. She is the former deputy president of South Africa, the founder of the Mlambo Foundation, a gender activist, and a campaigner for universal access to education. She has worked in government, both in the private sector and civil society, and was actively involved in the struggle to end apartheid in her home country of South Africa. Like many of us here today, Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka has humble beginnings and early ties to the YWCA. She began her career as a teacher and gained international experience as a coordinator at the World YWCA in Geneva, where she established a global program for young women. A longtime champion of women's rights, she is affiliated with several organizations devoted to education, women's empowerment, and gender equality. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Thank you very much. And greetings to all members of the YWCA, supporters, and partners. Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. We are now 26 years after we adopted the Beijing Declaration and its platform for action. We would have wanted women to be in a much better place at this time. 26 years would have meant that women are represented in decision-making bodies, in governments, in private sector, in civil society, and in professional bodies. It is true that women have come a long way. We see women in all these platforms. We see women to the extent that we sometimes may even think that women have actually made it. There is an illusion of adequate representation of women. It's only when you go to numbers that you recognize that we just have not come far enough. In the 26 years of implementing the Beijing Platform for Action, we have just moved from the 11 women who were heads of government in 1995 to 23 in 2020. 21. That is not good progress. Women parliamentarians have only just reached about 24% on global average. That is notwithstanding the excellent performance in some countries. We also have seen women in the private sector, women CEOs, reaching a mere 10%. And of course, there is also inadequate representation of women in boards. So the representation of women is a problem. We have faced the pandemic, and in the pandemic, we know that women have had the biggest problems. Women are underrepresented in the bodies that are supposed to deal with the response to the pandemic. And yet, the pandemic has disproportionately affected women and girls. Women have experienced higher levels of gender-based violence. They have lost income because many of the sectors affected in the pandemic, such as the service sector, tourism, hospitality, are sectors in which women are highly represented. But when you look at the way the response to the pandemic has been, again, women are underrepresented. We are calling for a response that looks into the future and corrects from the present. If we are looking at generations that will live through this pandemic, it is inevitable that we should be seeing more women represented. The last time I counted, there were only about 10% of countries who had committees that were looking at the response to the pandemic that had adequate representation of women. The global leadership of women is critical because the issues that we deal with, as projected, for instance, in Goal 5 of the Global Development Goals, tells us that these issues are global and they are everywhere. We therefore want to connect the women all over this world in the areas that they are in, and we also want to connect them in their different ages, from the youngest to the oldest. At this point in time, as we have tried to project in generation equality, this is the time for intergenerational leadership, where the youngest have already shown us that they have the content that is needed to bring about the changes that the world needs. I would also want to highlight the fact that women are severely affected as a result of the pandemic because they do not have digital literacy. There is a worrying gender digital gap. 32 countries who are the poorest countries, where women have limited access to connectivity, have lost money because women are not represented. The Web Foundation has highlighted that only countries that have done well and progress well with the use of internet in bringing their economies have been able to do this because they recognize the engagement of women. The 32 countries with a limited engagement of women have lost $1 trillion. So there is a cost to neglecting to represent women in decision-making bodies No country can afford to leave women behind. So what do we do as we build back better, as we emerge in this pandemic? We cannot go back to the world that was, because that world was not a perfect world. We cannot go back to the status quo. We need to redefine our world to address the inequalities that have been shown in COVID, and to make sure that whatever progress we make is progress that works for most of us, is progress that ensures that the role and the place of women in the world and everywhere where we are is addressed adequately. The YWCA has got women everywhere in the world doing many important things that are needed in society. I hope that as the YWCA, we will not be quiet. We will not accept the neglect of women. We will use our power, our resources, our young people to make sure that the place and the role of women is secured. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those very powerful remarks, Ms. Mlamba-Myuka. You are so right. We have come a ways in women's position worldwide, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. And I truly believe that you're also right. The World YWCA and the YWCA movement at large is well poised to play a vital role as we continue to move forward. The World Service Council, as you know, is 101 years this year. And that was the big focus for this annual meeting, is looking to the future and not the leaders of tomorrow, but really, truly the leaders of today, because you're right. These young women have already shown us what they are made of. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with our afternoon agenda and the very powerful panel that we have in store for you. So thank you again for your time, and we are truly honored. Following next, we have a very brief break built into the agenda. So take time, get up, stretch, refill your glass, and please join us back here in about 3 minutes, and we will continue with the second half of our agenda. And you do not want to miss that. Thank you. Today, I'm here to introduce you to Dr. Wanda A. Hendricks. Dr. Hendricks is a distinguished professor emerita at the University of South Carolina. She has been engaged in recovering and uncovering the histories of Black women for more than 30 years. She served as the National President of the Association of Black Women Historians from 2003 to 2005, and has authored 2 very successful books. Today, she is here to talk to us about the first biography that she has written of Maddie Hall Zuma, who was a global activist elected to the executive committee of the World YWCA in 1955. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Hendricks.
You're very welcome, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here. The last time I was at the World Service Council meeting was 2018 in New York, where I told a group, a small gathering, about Maddie Hall Zuma and how important she was to the World YWCA. So it is indeed a pleasure to be here.
We are thrilled to have you. So let me ask the first question that's a pretty obvious one. How did you first become interested in Maddie Hall Zuma?
Well, like most of the audience, I had no idea who she was, and it was by happenstance, actually. I had been visiting her hometown of Winston-Salem for years as a young adult. My great aunts and my uncle and cousin lived there. At some point, they sold their property in Winston-Salem and moved to Cameron Avenue. And Miss Maddie, as they called her, happened to be their neighbor. She was actually, just for me, the woman who came out on her front porch in the morning and waved at us in the mornings. It wouldn't be until much later that I would discover who she actually was. And to learn that she was actually one of the most significant global Black female activists of the 20th century.
How incredible that she was right next door. So can you tell us when and why Miss Maddie Hall Zuma became a part of the YWCA?
Her parents actually taught her as a young kid how important it was to give back to her community, and really instructed her on how to be of service to her community. And she lived in Winston-Salem, as I noted, most of her life. And what we have on the screen now are 2 photographs from the Winston-Salem Journal. One of them demonstrates that she was the general secretary of the YWCA. And so there's a long history there, because the second picture demonstrates what Jim Crow was. So she's operating under Jim Crow. The Black Y could not exist without the permission from the white Y. And the white Y had been in Winston-Salem for more than a decade before they gave women like Maddie Hall Zuma to start a Black Y. They wanted to help the African-American community, particularly young girls and young women who were migrating to the city. Maddie Hall Zuma became interested in the Y because of her parents. They were stewards in the community. They very much encouraged her to be of service to her community. And they were also very religious. They were an AME Zion church family, and encouraged her to engage with the church as well as with the community. And the YWCA seems to have been the most likely organization for her and a number of her cohorts to belong to. But they could not do that without the permission of the white Y in town that had been there for a decade. And so the first picture that you see is her. She was a general secretary. They called her the secretary in the article from Winston-Salem Journal in 1927, but she was actually the general secretary. And she is in making sure that the fee for the summer camp for young women is low enough so that these young girls and young women can actually attend the camp. The second photo or image that is on the screen demonstrates to you how Jim Crow operated. This was the main newspaper in town, but it was a Jim Crow newspaper. And so they sectioned off what was happening with African Americans under the colored people section. But the good news was they actually reported on African Americans. And so she became a popular person in the newspaper. And that was one of the ways that I found out how important she was to the Winston-Salem community.
Wow, that is so incredible how she played such an integral role in the YWCA and her local community. And I understand that after that, she had moved to South Africa. So why and when did she go to South Africa, and what was that like for her?
It's an interesting story, actually. She met an American-trained physician by the name of Alfred Bettini Zuma in New York. And while she was at Columbia University, going to school there for her master's degree. And he became quite smitten with her. She wasn't so smitten with him initially, but so they started a correspondence relationship, if you want to call it that. And he asked her to marry him several times. She finally relented. And in 1940, got on a ship in the New York harbor and sailed to Cape Town, South Africa, to marry him. They married in 1940, and by December of 1940, he would become president of the African National Congress, which thrust them into this international stage. There was racism in South Africa, of course, but by 1948, the election of 1948 sort of brought in apartheid in South Africa. It was a different kind of racism, a more draconian one, and one that Ahmed Zuma had never experienced, having come from Jim Crow. Often they're equated, but Ahmed Zuma argued that they were not. She actually declared at one point that apartheid was way worse than the Jim Crow that she had grown up under. But they became a power couple internationally. And she would start the Zenzele clubs there, in addition to becoming the president of the African National Congress's Women's League. And so life there for her, as you can tell from this Greensboro article that was from the AP, and it was sent out internationally and all over the United States, of course, and Canada. Her family saw it in Winston-Salem. Greensboro is next door to Winston-Salem. And as you can see, the caption underneath links the Tar Heel state of North Carolina with Africa. And she is providing that link. Essentially, she and her husband were, under the apartheid rule, were literally run out of their homes. They wanted the land to create a white suburb. And so she and Alfred B. Zuma put up a gallant fight. And this newspaper article is a part of that world fight against apartheid and the apartheid government. But they lost. They were ultimately forced to move. So life was not always comfortable for her in South Africa.
I can imagine what challenges she overcame. So I imagine that it was quite difficult for you to track down enough information to write this biography about her. Where were you able to find the information, the resources to write about her?
It was a little difficult. As you can tell, I use newspapers quite a bit, but the archives became the most important sources. The Winston-Salem University archives was one of them. The University of Witwatersrand in South Africa was another. And then one of the most important archives was the World YWCA. And so one of the photographs that the audience is seeing is the gardens outside of my hotel when I got permission from Casey Hardin, the General Secretary of the World Y, to be able to come and research Mehdi Zuma in the World Y archives. I arrived there in September of 2019, and it's a beautiful city. And so these gardens represent the beauty of Geneva. And then the next photo that you're seeing, or image that you're seeing, are some of the women who helped me, or generously gave their time to help me to really navigate the archives. This could only happen because Elaine Carlson knew all of them and encouraged them to welcome me to Geneva and to the archives and to be available for me. And that's exactly what they did. I'm not sure I would have been able to understand the importance of the worldwide and the importance of the worldwide to Mady Hall Zuma had they not given me so much of their time.
Elaine Carlson and our World YWCA staff are truly incredible, and we are fortunate to have them on. Now, while you were perusing through the World YWCA archives, pray tell, what did you find?
I found a lot, actually, far more than I ever imagined. I told Casey Harden and all the women that you saw in the previous photo that I wanted to do a happy dance. And I figured if I did one, they'd all probably sort of cart me off to an insane asylum, wondering what was wrong with me. But I was shocked at what I found, actually, and very, very happy. And so these next photographs, the next 4 photographs are actually of Mady Hall Zuma engaged in the executive committee. The first 2, as well as engaged with people in the worldwide organization. The first 2, the first one is in 1956. She was elected to the executive committee, and she would become the first Black woman from South Africa elected to the executive committee in 1955 at Royal Holloway College in England. And so this first photograph shows her first year, actually full year on the executive committee in 1956. The second photograph is important because what you see there is Lillis Barnes, who was an American who was elected worldwide president after World War II and would remain president until 1955. She actually visited Alfred B. Zuma and Mady Hall Zuma at their home in South Africa. So, and they developed a long-term friendship. And she would do the same with other worldwide members as well. The next 2 photographs are actually about her second term on the executive committee, because she would serve 2 terms, 2 4-year terms. And so you will see a photograph of her in 1961 with a number of white women. It doesn't quite look like they're working there, but they may be on a little break. And what's odd is a cigarette in one of the white members' hands, especially in today's climate. But that was the world in the 1960s. And then the second photograph you have of her is in 1961. I have way more photographs, and the interesting thing here is none of the pictures that I'm showing you actually will show up in the book. These are sort of the ones that didn't make the book. So, like I said, I was stunned at how much information was available in the Y on her.
Wow, if these pictures weren't even included in the book, I can't wait to see the information that was included in the book. You have brought to life the story of a woman who impacted the YWCA movement and would have otherwise may have been forgotten. So thank you so much for taking the time to do the research, to write this incredible book, and to share it with us here at the World Service Council. We cannot wait for the unveiling. Expect my pre-order.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me. And you're exactly right. A woman that most of us had no idea who she was. It is a powerful story. And I actually learned a lot from actually writing the book. And I am hopeful that those who do purchase the book will enjoy the story and the way that I've written it. And again, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be able to attend the World Service Council.
Thank you.
Connie Tate's destiny as a YWCA leader was forged at birth. She literally grew up in a household that was all about the YWCA, a home where she was regularly exposed to interracial and international dinners and meetings. Her grandmother was president of the New York City YWCA in the 20s, and her mother was president of the YWCA USA board in the 50s. During her college years, Connie enjoyed her stint as a counselor at the YWCA camp in the Catskills. But it wasn't until she retired from teaching and raising her family that she reconnected with the YWCA as a fully committed volunteer. She joined the World Service Council in 1982 at the request of Mary Rockefeller and served as chair from 2011 to 2019. Prior to that, she was involved in several national YWCA committees and served as president of the New York City YWCA from 2000 to 2004 and vice chair until 2009. In 2012, the New York City YWCA honored Connie as its Citizen of the Year. Her devotion and dedication to the World YWCA came from years of travel to World YWCA meetings, witness trips, and personal travel around the globe. She was a World YWCA delegate to the yearly United Nations Commission on the Status of Women since its inception and was instrumental in arranging a YWCA USA World Service Council reception for the World YWCA delegation, consistently one of the largest NGOs in attendance. Along with other World Service Council members including Rima and Doris Salah and Mildred Persinger, Connie personally hosted international YWCA visitors and others upon their arrival in New York City. These visits and reports on the UN Convention on the Status of Women was shared in newsletters and on the World Service Council website. To Connie, the one upside that COVID brought to the world was the expansion of digital technology and the ability to meet, see, and hear each other on a variety of virtual platforms. She hopes this will lead to increased interaction among NGOs as they reimagine new and more effective ways of work. Joyce Mim served as chair of the World Service Council for 22 years from 1989 to 2011 and was instrumental as a member long before that. She led with sublime grace and, in the words of Mary Ann Lundy, was cordial and welcoming with her knowledge of everything YWCA. Her letters engaging members were memorable for their beautiful language. Joyce was introduced to the YWCA while a student at the University of Texas, where she credits Rosary Oakes, director of the YWCA at the university, for nurturing and training that led to unimaginable opportunities for travel and to learn about the world. Not only did she participate in a student study tour of Europe, she went on the first USA student exchange visit to the USSR, to several places where no Americans had been before. As a student, she also attended the World Council in Mexico, plus subsequent World Councils in Switzerland, Norway, Korea, and Kenya. From student to consummate YWCA leader, she chaired many committees, including administering the USA-USSR exchange program for YWCA USA and serving as president of the Montclair YWCA and its board of trustees. She proclaims that the YWCA has put her in extraordinary and unusual places such as the Ukraine, the White House, China for the YWCA's 100th anniversary, and the convention in Cleveland where attendees joined the protests in the streets, at a time when people were willing to get out and take risks. Concerned about where we are in this new reality, Joyce challenges the YWCA to let go of old norms and explore new ways to address the issues that have been unveiled by COVID and political division. World Service Council members will always remember how she ended her meetings with this Quaker invitation: to walk cheerfully over the face of the earth, responding to that of God in everyone.
Wasn't that a lovely tribute to two YWCA World Service Council trailblazers, Joyce Mims and Constance Tate? You both have made such incredible contributions to the YWCA World Service Council and the World YWCA movement at large. We cannot thank you enough. Next, I'm excited to announce our panel discussion for the day. Our panel will be moderated by Muna Kildawi Killingback, who happened to be one of the very first interns of the World YWCA back in 1990. But aside from that, Muna has had a very illustrious career with the YWCA and professionally as well. Currently, she serves as the program director at the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, where she oversees the graduate certificate program in gender, leadership, and public policy. Prior to that, for about 10 years or so, she was the director of communications at the World YWCA. So I won't get into her entire dossier because it's quite extensive and she is brilliant and we are so thankful to have her. Muna, I appreciate you joining us today and for kicking off this fantastic panel discussion.
Oh, thank you so much for your kind words and that lovely introduction, Andrea. I am so delighted to be here with you all, and especially with our former General Secretary, Musimbi Kanyoro, who has the same initials as I do and the same birthday month. So we have a lot in common, and we worked together for several years in the World Office. And I learned so much from Musimbi, so I'm grateful to be together with her on this panel. So, as well as our exciting young women interns. So, I am, as I said, very excited to be here, and I'm delighted to be part of this wonderful panel of World YWCA interns. And at the 101st World Service Council meeting, so 101 years already. So, and if the World Service Council is now 101, think about it, the World YWCA is even older. Founded in 1894, it is now almost 130 years old. So interns, you can expect an exciting year of growth and new experiences. You will be asked to do many things, some of them which will be scary to you that you never did before. And I'm speaking from experience as one of the very first interns, as Andrea mentioned. I arrived at the World Office in October 1990, that's when the Young Women's Internship Program started, along with Elizabeth Yavana Songa from the YWCA of Sierra Leone. Our General Secretary was Elaine Heth-Steele, who has remained one of my mentors over the years as well. And the World Office was organized differently then, too. We had a Secretary for Development, Doreen Boyd, also one of my mentors, who later became the World YWCA Deputy General Secretary. We had a Secretary for Advocacy, Dimza Pitiana from South Africa. And at the time, the World YWCA was very active in the fight against apartheid, as well as for Palestinian human rights. Apartheid was dismantled officially in 1994, but the situation in Palestine has only worsened over time and still needs our World YWCA advocacy and solidarity. We also had a Secretary for Energy and Environment, the renowned late Ruth Lechty, who traveled around the world showing women how to create sustainable, eco-friendly technologies. Our Secretary for Finance and Administration was Elaine Carlson, who was a great support for us new interns. Elaine is now a leader in the World Service Council and helped to make this event possible. And Elaine also served as a Deputy General Secretary for many years. And last but not least, we had a young women's coordinator who was Rosemary Machicado from Bolivia, who supervised us interns. And Pumzili, of course, was the first young women's coordinator at the World YWCA office. Rosemary and I are also still friends, and she visited me in Boston a couple of years ago. So you can see that the World YWCA builds lasting friendships across the years and over continents. We are all here today united by this international movement formed by women for women. The women who founded the World YWCA and the YWCA World Service Council had a vision of a better world and women as agents of change. They created the YWCA movement to be a platform and a vehicle for women who cared and women who had a calling to come together to be the difference we wanted to see in the world, to paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi. And the World YWCA's rich history remains a source of learning for us. We were intersectional even before intersectionality was conceptualized by the scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. In the field of international relations, the World YWCA is considered a global governance actor, a key part of civil society who brings the voices of the population of people on the ground in the grassroots to the international organizations who can make a difference at the global governance level. Today, we are here together at a very difficult time in the world, and I cannot paint a rosy picture. We are confronted by climate change impacts, gender-based violence, racist violence, and structural violence exacerbated by vast disparities in wealth and increasing income inequities within countries and between countries. We have occupation, sanctions, war, a culture of human rights violations, and militarism that sucks money away from human needs and directs it toward human death. At this juncture, we YWCA sisters must look at the world and decide whether we want to go down the path of reform feminism or revolutionary feminism, a distinction made by Black feminist theorist Bell Hooks. As our 2035 goal is to transform power structures, I know that we want to be revolutionary feminists who actively resist racism, injustice, and all forms of oppression, as well as patriarchy. But it is here at the World YWCA and all the YWCAs that we always draw hope and light from each other. We have maintained our relevance by always listening to and connecting to our grassroots through our structure as a movement, where actions at the world level are informed and directed by the conditions experienced by our sisters in national and local associations. So we collectively decide at World Councils which issues require a global level intervention. And we have that platform because nearly 130 years ago, leaders of 4 YWCA national associations founded the World YWCA to give women a say in the international issues that were affecting their lives and to allow them to collaborate across nations to solve common problems affecting women in our societies. So I am very much looking forward to our conversation with our young women leaders today. And now I'd like to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves, where they are from, and what led them to be here today at this very moment with us at the World Service Council meeting. Annie, would you please like to tell us something about yourself? What brought you here to this moment at the World Service Council meeting, and tell us where you're from?
Thank you, Muna. I am Annie Priyanka from the YWCA of Secondary Bad, India, and I'm a board member of the YWCA Secondary Bad, and I've been appointed as a chairperson for the religious committee and also associated with media projects and programming. I'm currently doing my undergraduation in commerce, which is international business. And what brought me here is the internship that I'm doing currently, that is World YWCA Leadership Cohort Program 2021. I am grateful for them for giving me such a beautiful opportunity. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Annie. Hannah, would you like to tell us what brought you here to this moment and where you're from, a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Hannah Thalia James. I am from Papua New Guinea and I'm a Pacific Islander, just representing my region. I work for the YWCA of PNG, attached on a EU-funded project, which focuses on peace building and conflict resolutions. So being engaged by the YWCA of PNG for about 1 year and 6 months has given me an insight into the work of World YWCA, and I came to be selected for the Young Women Leadership Cohort last year. This training has helped me further with my leadership skills and knowledge, and has helped open different doors for me, like being invited to speak on the panel of this World Service Council meeting. It's a privilege to be here, and I look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
think everyone is delighted that you're here too, Hannah and Annie. So I'd like to ask you both, what is something that is making you excited right now about the world, about your work, about your being part of the leadership cohort? What is one thing, Annie, that's making you excited right now?
Right now, I'm excited about one thing is to meet such amazing people. Like I have never dreamt of it. So sharing my thoughts, expressing my views, and hearing something from each of you is exciting me. And I'm very curious to learn more and to know more of you.
And Hannah?
Well, Annie, yours is a bit very colorful than what I'm about to say. So I come from a region that is probably the least developed in the global south. And the countries in the Pacifica have come a long way from colonization. A few are still struggling to decolonize themselves. Even in my country, colonization has had a huge impact on our lives. And this generation, or my generation, is caught in between trying to distinguish what is our Melanesian way and what is the outside or foreign way, and how it has influenced us, the way we think, the way we act and speak. But one thing that I am most excited about that women have risen from both the global south and north to fight for and excel in is the right to education and employment. These are the rights that were denied for so long for women in countries that were colonized or were doing the colonizing. I love the fact that women in the Pacific Islands are breaking barriers to becoming the first doctors in their villages, the first accountants in their tribes, the first PhD holder in their country, or the first degree holder in their family. And that is what makes me excited to know that women and girls in my country and across the Pacific are changing power structures and challenging gender roles through education and employment.
Well, that is really exciting, Hannah. It's really interesting too that you're discussing decolonization. I'm taking a class right now on decolonial theory and enjoying so much reading, doing a deep dive into Franz Fanon and Edward Said and Gayatri Spivak and so forth. So anyway, that's excellent that you're having that discussion. And we know too that colonialism also brought with it, imposed a lot of Western patriarchal structures on the societies that were colonized and kind of suppressed the natural, indigenous cultures that were often really much more empowering of women and their roles. So anyway, and I'd like to ask Musimbi Kanyoro, our former General Secretary of the World YWCA, because she is with us here today, if she could also let us know what is making you excited now, Musimbi.
Thank you very much, Mona, and thank you very much, Hannah, Annie, and Adezu for being there on the panel. What is making me excited is to see the panelists, because when you have served and have been a certain age and you have progressed on, you always want to feel satisfied when you know that what you are part of is continuing. When I was young, like the sisters on this panel, I too was an intern in some place. And I see that this continuation of learning really is there. The intergenerational UN forum just ended. And one of the most exciting things was to hear the voices of the young women. And it made me so much feel that the leadership of young women is here to stay. And the YWCAs all over the world have a job cut out for us. That is making me excited.
Oh, thank you, Musimbi. That is something indeed to be excited about. That's right. The learning continues. The intergenerational dialogues continue through the World YWCA. So, and as part of our preparation for the meeting, I asked the panelists if they could look back at some of the policy statements of the World YWCA over the past 100 years, particularly the development policy, because it's the 30th anniversary of the development policy this year, and also the Women's World Agenda that was passed at the end of our centenary year in 1995. So our panelists, what surprised you as you look back at our long legacy of really cutting edge policy statements? Annie, would you like to start?
Yes, Mona. What I'm most excited about this advocacy and policies of the World YWCA is, in spite of so many struggles, that is oppression, racism, and sexism, they have never gave up in developing women. They have made policies which takes an action for the development of women. They have not left behind the women, even after so much of discrimination and so much of hatredness. They have still brought up such policies and participation of women in each and every sector. In earlier days, there were times when women have to be left alone. I mean, she has to not participate in everything. But because of the policies and advocacies of YWCA, there are many such women who are stepping out of their house and participating in events. And that's something I'm amazed of. And I would like to also add that it is over 100 years that YWCA is working. It's not something which is easy. They are pulling up the same encouragement and courage for all the young girls also to come up and to support. So this is something that has surprised me.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Yes, they've never wavered, have they? World YWCA has never wavered. We've never wavered. So, and Hannah, what about you? What surprised you when you look back at the World YWCA policy statements?
Yeah, thank you, Mona. I think Annie covered pretty much everything that I wanted to say. It's just been 1 year, 7 months, like I said earlier on in my journey in the YWCA movement. But this was actually my first time to see the policy and the advocacy work of World YWCA so far captured in such a comprehensive way. And I actually have a lot of reading to do now, to be honest, to learn of how far the movement has come and the different changes that has taken place over the years. But one of the things that surprised me the most is probably the work that was done even before I was born, to give women and girls like a safe space and sort of like a pillar to lean on and do the work that they wanted to do and achieve the goals that they wanted to do, but together in solidarity. And it sort of gave the platform that women and girls needed before, and even more so now, to continue to amplify their voices and do the work that is focused on most probably transforming power structures and dynamics that were more male dominated. So thank you. That's what surprised me the most.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's right. Yeah, it's always the World YWCA has always been a platform for women and women's voices. And can you imagine how much worse off the world would be if we had not had the World YWCA and the women, who engaged in the international organizations at pivotal moments to make sure that women's voices were heard and that they were included. So. Yeah. Lucindy, I'd like to ask you if you could comment a little bit about the legacy of the World YWCA from your perspective as one of our top leaders.
If I had a researcher right now, yes, I would ask that researcher to classify these policies that we've had over 100 years, because there are many and they are different, and they reflect the time that each subject was important at that particular time. And when you go far right back at the beginning, I personally have been very surprised that YWCA worried about things like accepting everyone and not asking questions about women, not doubting women. Quite early, before any one of us knew what it means to trust women, to actually spell out things like violence, domestic violence, everything that we actually take for granted now and think we invented it. More than 100 years ago, women of that time were thinking about it. They were thinking about the safety of women in housing. Then there are political statements. And if I come into the most recent in political statements, it's really good to see some of the successes, like the successes over the abolition of apartheid and what YWCA statement stood with the fight against apartheid at a particular time. But also it was interesting to me at some stage when there was the East-West distinctions, and YWCA seems to have known that, yes, these political divisions existed, but it was important to make sure that if there is anything that can keep the women of the East and the women of the West joined together and hear each other, that was a bigger statement than simply keeping the two aside. So there are certain statements actually that allowed communication of YWCAs between women who are in the East, politically East, and in the politically West, which is quite interesting for me. And I feel like that was quite a foresight. Then, of course, there are lots of things that refer to the economic differences and what to do about it. Childcare, and quite in the beginning, knowing that if you have got to have women go into the public space, then you do need to find a way for childcare. Nowadays, you hear many women talk about childcare, and not many actually go back and credit the YWCA to have been a long advocate for years, year after year. And not only did they do advocacy for childcare, they initiated childcare spaces for women of the world, for families of the world. I could speak about this for ages, but I just feel like we have a legacy who's really, the women on whose shoulders we stand on had a foresight so much ahead of them. And if any of them lived back today, if they could be alive today, they would look back and say, thank goodness that they had that wisdom and the world is built on it.
Thank you, Musimbi. That was really well put. Yes, it's amazing to look at the span of issues that the World YWCA took on very fearlessly and made really bold policy statements in regard to so many of them. Some of them you mentioned. Something that always touches me when I read it, just one small example, is something from the preamble to the World YWCA Constitution in 1955 that said, recognizing the equal value in God's sight of all human beings without distinction of race, nationality, class, or religion, and seeking to promote understanding and cooperation between people of different nations, races, and groups. So that was back in 1955.
Allow me to say one thing I needed to say and I forgot.
Yeah.
One of my pain is probably Middle East, because even during my time, we made a lot of statement about Middle East. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still a thorn in the flesh. And I think that is something that advocacy must still continue to build upon, and specifically the advocacy towards the well-being of the Palestinian people. I think I wanted to say that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Musimbi. That is still, right, a situation where human rights are still deteriorating and not being respected at all. It just unfortunately goes from bad to worse. So I totally agree with you that we still need strong World YWCA advocacy and solidarity on that front toward Palestine, and to work with the Palestinian and Israeli women together who seek peace and justice in that region. So moving along, I would like to ask you all, what is the power structure that you would like to see most urgently transformed, and why? And how should it be transformed? And what would look differently if this power structure were transformed? So, Hannah, would you like to start this time?
Sure, no worries. So I think the governance structure, one power structure that I want to be changed is governance structure. It needs to be changed, especially in the Pacific Islands, the countries in the Pacific Islands, from like the government to organizations to even communities. In my country, places of power in governance are always male dominated in most sectors. Women have to fight their way into these spaces. And over the years, we have seen changes, but it is not really in the structures, but more systematic and does not really last for long. So I think the spaces need to be created for women and need to be built into the structures. Take, for example, an organization, there has to be a certain percentage that has to be women employees so that employers are not biased during recruitment. And especially in the managerial or decision-making roles, there has to be like a certain number of positions that require women employees. So this will give women more chances and courage to apply and lead in that role. And they in turn will create more spaces for women and girls to kind of continue through the pathways that they help to create.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Hannah. So you're thinking about government and private, and both government and private sector, both. The need for more women and more paths to women.
It's a big need in especially the Pacific Islands and what I see in my country in Papua New Guinea.
Okay. All right. That is really interesting. Yeah, that seems to be worldwide, but I think in some regions it might be more needed than ever. So, Musimbi, may I ask you from your perspective, what power structure would you like to see transformed?
There's something that I learned from Elizabeth Palmer. And for those of you that will not be familiar, she is one of the former general secretaries of the World YWCA, and she was quite a legend. One, because she was there for a very long time, and secondly, because she was very courageous in what she did and what she helped to happen during her time. And so I got to know Elizabeth during the time that I was general secretary and thereafter, and was very much connected to her until her death at 104 years. She said to me that earlier on in the conversations about how we govern ourselves in the World YWCA as member associations, they debated about whether those YWCAs that are large and have abilities, financial membership, etc., should have veto opportunities like happens at the United Nations. We know that the nations which have got good resources always also can veto things or have more say, more voice. And they decided against that. And said that every member YWCA would be a member YWCA without the ability to outvote others by veto. Now, I often think about that in many, many different structures of the world. And I look to a way in which we can influence that kind of decision-making at United Nations, for example, at corporations. Right now, if you are following the news, you are seeing what different corporations and huge ones that have influence are able to make quite a lot of decisions that impact all of us. And we have very little that we can do about it because power and money speak louder. And this YWCA women were trying to make power and money not be the deciding factor when people come together as members or when people come together as an organization. So that's a very big systemic thing and that we can't really change. But somehow I would like us to bring this thought system in small ways, in different structures where we are, that we are able to speak about what is it that we can initiate that does not have privilege become the decision-making, have the decision-making power only, that actually we don't mute the voices of those people that don't have the privilege or are not easily visible because of different reasons. It could be because of poverty. It could be because of not sitting at the tables. It could be because they are discriminated in some ways. So the systemic part of the power structure is what I worry about. And there are many ways in which there is systemic holding on to power by privilege of money, by privilege of education, by privilege of geography, by privilege. These are the structures I would wish to see change, even in a little way.
That's very, very excellent insights, Ms. Simbi. Thank you very much. That's absolutely, I agree with you 100%. And in the United States, we also often talk a lot about white privilege, that people realize that they have just by virtue of being born, a certain color, and people often don't realize that is a privilege, that an unearned privilege. You also made me think of the post-colonial feminist theorist Gayatri Spivak, who talks about the subaltern being the person who is really disenfranchised from all political structures and has no voice. And that is something in the World YWCA I think we're always trying to think about how to elevate the voices of those who are really outside of political structures and have no political voice. If I may just also mention too that in the mid 90s, the World YWCA was actually involved in efforts to reform the United Nations, particularly that P5, the powerful five veto. So. And I remember being sent to meetings about that very topic, about UN reform. So that was something the World YWCA had taken on as well. So, Annie, back to you. What power structure would you like to see transformed, and what would look differently if it were transformed?
The power structure that I want to transform is gender equality for women in the case of education, employment opportunities, and for survival needs. As Musimbi has mentioned, financial independence is something which has to be one of the privileges given to the woman. And as Hannah has mentioned about governance, is something women are deprived of. They're not able to get what they own or what they are. So yeah, the difference, how can we bring this power structure is by educating women. Most of the women are not aware of the things, and we have to advocate to them about things, and they have to take it in practice. And I feel that in the current situation, this power structure is very important. In India, due to lockdown, due to shutting down of schools and colleges, they have stopped women to go to colleges. I would tell that the boys are being educated well and the girls are not educated. So this is something which always strikes me out, and I feel it should be transformed. And once this gets transformed, I think the world is freed of all the discrimination, freed of all violence, and it will just be an amazing, different world. Yeah, that's what I want this power structure to be transformed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the education of women is going to lead the way to this transformation. Is that? Yes. That's very interesting. I think it's something we all agree on, right? Yes. So moving ahead, I'd like to ask everyone, in your program and advocacy work at the YWCA, how does your association approach intersectionality regarding the cumulative impacts of gender, race, ethnicity, class, and caste? So how do we incorporate other elements of discrimination and oppression, including racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, class discrimination, and oppression, and caste discrimination, along with gender? Because we know that if we only address gender as the foundational difference, we might only be helping the most elite women in our society. So we do need to approach our issues intersectionality through an intersectional lens. So let me ask Hannah, if you might be able to address, in your YWCA, how do you feel like you're tackling any particular issue, or how do you approach issues from an intersectional lens?
Thank you, Mona. So this is actually a new framework that I learned about through the word intersectionality being mentioned during the leadership program that I undertook last year. And to be honest, it is a framework that we at the YWCA of PNG have to look at and understand, and to see the factors that affect the people that we work with or partner with or impact through our programs and projects. So my country has so many ethnic groups, the different classes of living standards and the cultures that we have.
Okay, so
I think one example at the YWCA of PNG, through the project that I work with, it focuses on building youths to be youth peace and protection champions in villages where women or young girls, especially, are not given like leadership roles and are not allowed to speak or participate because they're females or are young mothers. So this is also because of their ethnicity as well. This varies in different ethnicities throughout PNG. So as well, so there are taboos or rules in place, which takes away that privilege that other girls have. So through this project, we encourage and we support the young girls, especially through this program, to participate and have their voices be heard through our programs and activities that we run. I believe that we are doing intersectional approaches in many of our programs and projects, but we do not realize that. But I take this as like a challenge I'm posing on myself and the YWCA of PNG and also other YWCAs that don't really look at the framework of this intersectionality to begin to start looking at it and see how best we can come up with like better intersectional approaches in our programs and in our work to address issues in our country so that no one is left out.
No one is left behind, right? Exactly. That's the intersectional approach is exactly designed to make sure no one is left behind. That's right. Exactly. That we consider everyone, no matter their socioeconomic background or racial or ethnic or caste background. So, Annie, would you like to talk about any kind of intersectional approach that you see happening in your YWCA?
Yes. In our YWCA, we work with the communities, which we first go and approach to the leaders of the communities, and we advocate them about our policies, about what we are going to do for the community. And then we also involve the women and the youth to come and participate in our programs. And the YWCA has facilitated with many programs such as domestic violence, and it has arranged medical camps, and it has done a lot of programs with the communities. And the best part of this communities is all these communities are with all the people like connected to gender, race, and yeah, there are different types of people who reside there. So it doesn't only work from one side; it goes on with every one of them. So that's how my YWCA works with.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Well, it's so good that people are thinking through an intersectional lens, try to bring up and lift up the voices of the women who are the most excluded. Who have multiple oppressions, not only gender, but Thank you all. Thank you, Annie, Hannah, and Musimbi for being part of this panel. It's been a great conversation. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to ask all the questions, but I hope that we can continue this conversation. It was really a pleasure to speak with you all. Would you like to just say any final words as we wrap up?
Sure. Muna, thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. It's been a lovely meeting you all. Thank you to the World Service Council for this opportunity to be part of the panel. I look forward to more interesting conversations around the World YWCA movement and how far it has come and how we can work together to build the movement throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, World Services Council, for giving us such an opportunity. And this is something which is really amazing. And I look forward to come upon with many more opportunities. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mustimbi, would you like to say a few words in closing?
I'm grateful for the voices of many young women in the YWCA, but I also, as the intergenerational link, want really to appreciate the people that have held the World Service Council together. We meet under the celebration of the World Service Council. We've just had two wonderful people that have kept the World Service going, Joyce Mims and Kate Tate. And we have also had names mentioned of somebody who was with us in the World Office, Elaine Carlson, and really kept the connection with the YWCA of the USA as well as the World YWCA and the World Council Service. I want to offer my gratitude to them and to offer my gratitude also to the so many general secretaries of the World YWCA over the years, including those that have come after me, Nyarazai and Casey, who are just continuing in the tradition that we inherited from the others. And this really gives me joy, continuing to support young women and to make sure that young women have a space of their own, but also a space within the movement to really influence the movement. And thank you, Mona, for your own participation in this as well. And for this opportunity for all of us to be part of the celebration of the World YWCA or YWCA of the USA World Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mustimbi. And I also would like to echo my great gratitude to the World Service Council for uplifting the work of the World YWCA and offering us really stimulating challenges and opportunities to discuss what is happening with women around the world every year at our meeting. So thank you so much again to Joyce and to Connie and to Elaine and Joelle and the whole team. And also to the World YWCA leadership. As Mustimbi mentioned, all our general secretaries, who Mustimbi, Nairadze, the most recent ones, Elaine Steele, and Casey now, and also our world presidents. And I would like to especially thank Mira for her leadership. Mira Rizek, who was the first World YWCA president from an Arab country, from Palestine. So thank you, everyone. And I thank you, Andrea, very much for also leading us and organizing us. So have a good day, everyone.
Wasn't that panel remarkable? We are so fortunate in the World YWCA movement to have such powerful women from multi-generations imparting their wisdom and their dreams with us. Our next speaker is actually our up-and-coming co-chair of the World Service Council, Gloria Chun-Hu. Gloria is a former national board member and vice president of YWCA USA. She currently is on the executive committee for the YWCA World Service Council. Previously, she served on the boards of the YWCA Boston and the YWCA San Jose, which now is called the Golden Gate Silicon Valley YWCA. Gloria, we are so fortunate to have you here with us and to be stepping in as the co-chair of the World Service Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for that warm welcome. I'm delighted and pleased to join you here today and to think about and reflect on not only what the great panel just said, but also about the fact that we are together as the YWCA World Service Council, looking back at 100 plus years of really having a global vision when its time was very, very innovative. It was a time 100 plus years ago when women just like us joined together to champion the very important work of the YWCA of the USA and the World YWCA and our commitment for dignity, freedom, peace, and justice. 100 years ago, there were only 17 YWCAs in the world, and now there are over 100, and we're doing such great work there. It's a global movement of women, young women, and girls looking for transformational change, and they're doing that. 2021 continues to be a very dynamic year with all kinds of events. And the global transitions have been significant. Our efforts are needed now more than ever. And please join me right now thinking about making a significant donation to the World Service Council and our world work. We need to make a difference to continue to work toward a global peace and justice, dignity and freedom for all. And this is what we can all do individually. Think also about making it a special gift. Stretch a little bit more, make this your regular gift plus 101 more. It's important to do so. I pledge to do so, and I hope you will join me. And so this really comes as the end of our formal program, but it doesn't have to end. If you're interested in continuing the discussion around many of the important topics that were discussed in the panel discussion or at any point today, we invite you to join the brief breakout groups session that immediately is following the close of this event. To participate in the breakout groups, please click the link in the chat window and you can join others to talk more directly and be involved. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for those closing remarks. And thank you for stepping up as the incoming co-chair of the YWCA World Service Council. I would like to take this time to extend a thank you to all of our guest speakers today as well. We were so blessed to have each and every one of you, true trailblazers and leaders in the industry around the world, leading the YWCA movement. We are appreciative of your talent, your time, and your skills. So thank each and every one of you. And I'd like to extend a final thank you to each one of you, our viewers, our participants in this meeting, because truly, without each and every one of you, we really wouldn't have much of an event today. So thank you for taking your time to register, to be a part of this virtual event. And as Gloria mentioned in her closing remarks, I hope that you will take the opportunity to join us in further discussion about the themes and ideas and thoughts that came up as part of the panel discussion. So displayed on your screen is a link that you can enter into your URL address, or you can click the link at the bottom of the watch window. It is http://wsc101.ywca.org/join us. By clicking on that link, you'll be redirected to the small group breakout sessions so we can all really dive more deeply into the issues impacting women around the world today. So we hope that you will take the time to join us. And also, as Gloria mentioned in her closing remarks, we hope that you will be able to give generously to the World Service Council so we can continue this important work that we are contributing to with the World Global YWCA movement. On the watch page, there is a donate button, I believe at the top right-hand corner. So feel free to click that button and you'll be redirected to the donate page. So wherever you are joining us from around the world today, I wish you health and good cheer. Thank you for your time. Bye.